Seems to be that way. Seems like it's on this year, yes? All right. Okay, more stuff up here. Great. Okay. Hi, I'm Sean Schmidt. I'm professor in the chemistry department and chair of the Apron committee, and so I'm here to welcome you to Apron, which is kind of nice this year because it's actually closer to the beginning than I'm actually saying welcome to Apron. So, you know, it's kind of nice. Okay, so about 150 years ago, right, there was a group of people in this area that had a vision about investing in the intellectual resources in this area, in this region, right, in Topeka. I think since then that vision really hasn't changed. Would that be fair to say, I think? You know, 15 years ago, a few faculty, well, back up for a second. If you think about what all has changed since then, the name of this organization has changed, right? From Lincoln College to Washburn University, finally now Washburn College and Washburn University. But even through all of those changes that have happened over those years, we're still working towards that scholarly growth, I think, right? 15 years ago, there was a group of faculty that felt like the students should be part of that, should share their voice in that scholarly growth, right? And that's where this idea of the Student Research Forum came from. We now call it Apron. This year, Apron has gone through another evolution. True. Today, we've got projects that are traditional scholarship, research, some outstanding fine arts, creative activities that we've seen. But also we're going to have projects in which scholarship has been applied to community service, leadership development, and other projects in which the worldwide experiences are being brought to our campus. And so, you know, names have changed, buildings have come and gone, and I think there are more buildings coming. Through all of this, that shared vision really hasn't changed. It's still about scholarship. It's still about that intellectual resources that we have in this region. Okay? I invite you today to take some time with these student presenters and engage with them. At this point, now the roles are reversed. We're now their students. They're our teachers. As such, we're called to learn from their scholarship. Take time to thank them, put your hand out, congratulate them on their fine work. Okay? Please do that. Intentionally do that. Now, the student projects that you see happen, they don't happen on their own. That takes mentors to help. On page, I think it's what, about 51, 55 in the program, you see a list of mentors. These mentors have done a lot of work, a lot of, we'll just say a lot of work. If you're a mentor and you're here, please stand up so we can thank you for your work. Please stand up. Thank you. Now, an event like Apron just doesn't appear out of nowhere. It takes a lot of work in the background. You see a list of folks on the back page that we need to thank. And also, probably to me, is more dear to me, are the folks that are serving on the Apron committee that have done most 90% of the work that you see today. If you're a representative of this area, if you're on the Apron committee, please stand up so we can thank you. Please stand up. Okay. We're not here for all that, are we? We're here for the last lecture, but we need to talk about some of that, I think, up front. Okay, so right now I'm going to introduce Regina Castle, and following Regina Castle, I would introduce Jim Martin, but he's sick today. So Gary Baker is going to come up after that and will be our host for our last lecture, and we'll introduce whoever that mystery person may be. So, Regina, if you'll come on up.
Each year, I get the privilege, of my students in creative media practicum design flyers, and the committee, and Sean and I look at the flyers and make comments and pick one, and from there, you know, we post them all over campus, and by we, I mean our students. So today, we just want to recognize, on the front of your cover, the design this year was by a Washburn Media senior, who's graduating and is excited about that. So if Israel Sanchez will come forward and receive his award.
The now. Gary, you're up.
Okay. Bill Roach earned a master's from Notre Dame and business and administration at Northwestern, and his doctorate from University of Michigan. He joined the KU faculty in 1974. In 1980, he also went to the insurance department as an actuary to assist Fletcher Bell. While he has been at, he joined Washburn in 1983 in the field of management. While at Washburn, he served on many universities and school business committees. He included the faculty senate. He was the chair of the Washburn School of Business faculty. He's had lifetime interests in fairness and equality. He has been the faculty advisor to Project Equal and Project Unity. He was the Washburn representative to the Kansas Board of Regents on the Pilford Commission on Diversity. His activities today include auxiliary communications with Douglas County. He's a volunteer with the Amateur Radio Club, a volunteer with the Lawrence Hospital. For many years, he has studied Latin. He has a Saturday morning class in Latin, and during the summer, he would take summer seminars in Latin in various parts of the country. So, non est mihi voluntus introducar Bill Roach.
Thank you. I think I should explain that I have a geek hat trick. I do actuarial science, I do medieval Latin, I do ham radio. I am very in touch with my inner geek. I say, I'm out and I'm proud. Okay, so that's I'm here today to talk about some teachers that made a real impact on my life. And I want to be thankful to those folks. And the first one I'll mention is my mother. And unfortunately, she didn't teach me to share or play well with others. that wasn't on her list. But what she did have is a tremendous sense of curiosity. And so that she was engaged with a lot of things. And that was really amazing. My mother raised 5 kids. She worked outside the home, so she was, I'm not sure how she had time to be engaged in as many things as she was, but her curiosity kind of drove my own. I saw that she was watching all these things that were happening in the world and was interested and committed to all this, and it made a difference to me. So one of the things that she did that was kind of surprising is the way she understood mathematics was not the same as I understand mathematics. I see a formula and that makes sense to me. And what she saw was a worksheet and an algorithm. And one of the things that happened, I think she was about 78 years old, and I asked her how to do a square root. Now, if you're old enough, you learned how to do a square root in second year algebra. Now, if you're young, you say, well, you push the square root button on the calculator. But this algorithm was a non-trivial undertaking. So I asked her how to do this because I was confident she would know how to do it. And she did. And it took her a minute or two to do that. And I found that understanding things as a worksheet or an algorithm is something that's a lot of our students do. They don't understand the algebra, but if you ask them to do a worksheet, they can. And one of the things I've done is when I allow students a formula sheet, I suggest that some formulas aren't terribly useful. that a worked problem will allow them to do that. So that's changed the way I taught things. And by the way, I do remember how to do a square root. And if you give me a little time, I can do a cube root calculation too, which is, I'm not a well man. No, that's the only thing I can say there. And then the next person I would list is Mrs. Spears. And I was homeschooled for a while. And the way that happened is I had a congenital defect in my aorta and my aortic valve. And that valve was damaged by rheumatic fever. So I was out of the regular school system. So Mrs. Spears came to my house, I think, 2 days a week. And she was an absolutely marvelous teacher. One of the things that I remember is a term project I did, and it had to do with the use of guard dogs in the Marshall Field store. That just happened to be something I read in the paper, and I thought that was a good thing to write a paper about. And Mrs. Spears encouraged that, and the next thing she did with me that I remember is I'd been reading the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, and so we churned butter one day, and that's hard to do. I thought, these pioneer folks, they were made of sterner stuff than I, and so it was really amazing to do that. So Mrs. Spears played a major role in my life. When I left the school system, I was reading at grade level and doing math at grade level. When I came back, I was 5 grades above grade level in reading. That's because I did a lot of reading, and I was more than a grade level ahead in math, and that was her doing. So Mrs. Spears was really, had I stayed in the regular school system, I don't think I would have done near as well in my subsequent education. So Mrs. Spears is an important individual. And then I'm going to list this is a book that's actually in Washburn's library. And I think it's George or Georg Polya, and it tells us how to solve problems, techniques for thinking about things, how to do word problems, speed, distance, time problems, which probably bring back some happy memories for many, many of you. So that book, I read it more than once. Did I say I wasn't a well person? Okay. Well, I made a huge difference in my life, made a lot of this stuff quite accessible. And so Polya's book was important to me. When I returned to the regular school system, she was, I can't think of anything in particular that she helped me with other than just getting through the day. I think my experience with grade school teachers there are those that are okay with little boys, and there are those that are not as okay with little boys. And this poor lady, she was, I think late 70s, early 80s, and she had a room full of 55 fifth graders. not for the faint of heart, is it? Not for the faint. So she was, just wonderful and kind of helped me make this adjustment. I could talk about some other folks, but I'm going to skip directly to my dissertation share. And that fellow, and you're saying, oh, well, this is moving right along. He's not going to take the 75 minutes that he threatened to take. And that's good. So Roger Wright was interesting. Lots of chairs are not engaged. Roger was engaged. And the deal we had was I would show up on a regular basis, mostly every week. I would show up with something in writing, and it would be typed. It would not be written on the back of envelopes, okay? And so Roger was there, and he was my mentor. And one of the things the lessons I really learned is I understood enough of academic life to know that there was no payoff for Roger for doing this. If you advise somebody working on a dissertation, when they consider salary increments, that isn't going to be on the list of things that are considered. And so the only thing I could do is I included Roger as a co-author on a paper, and it turns out a paper is one of the best things on Roger's resume, he very modestly said. Okay, and it's a paper that's quoted in the Journal of the Royal Society, so it's, so it's a nice paper. And so, but Roger was really good, and he's good in a way that, some of our Apron mentors are good at this one-on-one, and it's very, very costly to the faculty members that do this. They take a lot of time with it, and I'm not sure that the system recognizes it. And I'm going to mention one more. I mentioned the computer. I'll tell a couple of stories. One, I volunteer for radio things, and I was doing some programming of the radio that they have at Lawrence Memorial Hospital. And I downloaded a YouTube video, and I watched a particular segment of this YouTube video more than 24 times. 24. That's 24. Okay, that's a lot of time. Okay, so picture a classroom situation where a student asks you the same question 24 times. Oh, God. Now, please stop, okay? And so finally, I was able to program this radio. And one of the reasons that it was difficult to program is that, there's a button dial on the radio. So sometimes you use it as a button, sometimes you turn it as a dial. What it means is dependent on context. What printing on the screen changes so that you don't know whether you push the button, turn the dial, and then sometimes when you went in one direction, it wasn't reversible. You couldn't go back in the opposite direction. So I did get radio programmed, and so the YouTube is critical. One of the things I'm doing in retirement is learning how to play bridge or relearning how to play bridge. And so I get somebody that coaches me saying, you're bidding way short of your points, okay? If you play that 8 of diamonds now, you will take one fewer trick. So I'm getting coached, and it's not like a personal coach who sometimes says, what did you do that for, you idiot? But, so I've gotten a lot of coaching from the computer, and it's made a huge difference in learning. And so I've done a number of things. One that I did is when I was at Notre Dame, doing medieval Latin. Did I say I was geeky? But at any rate, the first day of class, the vocabulary list for the course was 1,500 words. And so what I did is I downloaded something called Quizlet and the vocabulary. And so I've got that on my cell phone. So I've got 1,500 flashcards in a matter of minutes. You know, you picture doing 1,500 flashcards. Do your hands hurt yet? Okay, so that did it. And then I also use Quizlet. If I get it for an iPad or a computer, I also get multiple choice questions. And so if our students do this, they have access to a series of multiple choice questions. You don't have to make them up. You do a search on Quizlet and the authors of your text, and you get these questions, which is probably going to be a segment of the final. So it's a wonderful thing for students to have. So I've done a lot of things with computers to enhance my learning, and particularly my continuing education, so that I'm going to have more teachers to thank down the road. I have some people to thank, but also some technology. And it's been, one of the things I'm very grateful to is both the technology and the teachers, the folks that have spent time with me. And it's really changed the nature of my life. I've enjoyed my life a great deal, and I enjoy a learning environment a great deal, and I continue to participate in this process. I'm working on a book now, and it looks like I will finish it. Okay, I don't know whether it will be probably published online. It's a real page turner. You'll all want to get a copy of it. It's a translation of an 1861 German actuarial paper on modified premium reserve systems. I'll autograph it, and I'll even mark some of the good parts for you. So if you want to skip to the salacious parts immediately, I will. I'm participating in this process, and teachers have made that possible. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to thank some of these individuals. And I won't go on for 75 minutes.
About the actuarial thing.
You ever use the Khan Academy? I've used the Quizlet.
Yes, and in fact, I'm working on my general ed requirements at this point in time, and so I use the Khan Academy, and well, here's one of the things I wanted to do, and is when we were in geometry, we learned Euclid's proof for the Pythagorean theorem, and it wasn't,
Maybe you did.
it wasn't that easy to follow. And so one of the things I found on the internet is I found a Java applet, and the figure that goes with Euclid's proof, it's called the bride's chair, and it's supposed to look like a bride's veil over the back of a chair, and it looks awful. I mean, it's just incomprehensible. But what the Java applet does is it makes things light up in sequence, and so you can do things with that. The Khan Academy, I find their explanations are really transparent for a lot of stuff, and so I'll go through and I like to do stuff like that. And most of the things I've done are mathematical, but I'm kind of fiddling with the periodic table right now, and that's kind of a central to the way the world works. So it's the Khan Academy is one of the best things that's ever happened, and it's there for anybody. It's wonderful. So yeah, Khan Academy is one of my favorite teachers. But I hope to get through the general ed requirements someday, but I'm not sure whether it'll be any day soon.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, if I was giving this lecture, I'd have a list of books up there. You can tell I'm in English. But I'm wondering if you could give us one or two of the best, most influential books you've ever read.
Well, I did with Polio's How to Solve It, and I'm not a very deep person, so I didn't, these philosophical works are not going to be on my list. I'm well, this is also in our library. And you look at it, it's 380 proofs of the Pythagorean theorem. Did I say I was geeky? I didn't know whether I had brought that up or not, but one of the more interesting ones was derived by President Garfield while he was in Congress. He developed an original proof for the Pythagorean theorem. And so that, one of the things that I like about that is the right figure makes a lot of things transparent. It's much easier to follow. And so making things transparent is good. Euclid is not transparent. His figure is an abomination, even with the Java applet. But in this book, and I'm sure you'll all want to run over and pick it up right now, is it's a lot of excellent figures and so in terms of it didn't change my life, but it changes the way I try to present things. And if I can do a figure to present a formula, boy, I'll do it. It makes I'm very visually oriented, and so if the figures make a huge difference to everybody's understanding. The algebra is not where a lot of people are at, and the pictures can make a lot of these things much easier to understand. So that book would be on my list. But again, I haven't picked things that are, the great ideas sort of thing. But I read Darwin's Origin of the Species. I've read some sequels to that. I like that. So
what is the least scholastic thing you've ever written and enjoyed?
Well, I like my experience in Latin. One of the things I was almost appalled at watching this is you see the Socratic method. Well, some of my classmates, I was uneasy about competing with people 45 years younger than I didn't need to be worried about this, as it turns out. Did not need to be worried, because some people think the weekend starts on Thursday night. It does not. But well, we would translate passages in turn, and on a normal day of class, I would get called on 3 times. Well, one day I got called on 7 times. We just got, and so that means you can't say, well, this is as far as they're going to get. I don't need to prepare anymore. But I also watched the teacher, and he would do this Socratic thing, Where's the verb? Okay. What tense is this? Is this indicative? Is this subjunctive? What structure? What kind of subjunctive is this? Is there a direct object here? Is there an indirect object? Well, this is absolutely wonderful if we've done our homework. If we have not done our homework, this is akin to vivisection. And the thing about this is the teacher didn't stop once he figured out that this kid didn't do his homework. It would go on for a while. And it was, I think it could have been reported to SRS. It was, it was that bad. But it was absolutely wonderful if you're engaged in the process. And so I saw that, and I tend to be a little bit into grammar and rules, and so that reflects rules outside of grammar. I'm not near as good at. I haven't taken near as much interest in rules in other areas of my life, but grammar, yeah, I'm okay. If this verb takes the dative case, I want to know about it, and that sort of thing. So again, those are things that influenced me. Yeah.
Two questions, really. One, I remember years ago having a conversation with you, and you have quite a fascination with Horatio Alger.
Oh, yeah.
And you didn't mention that in the talk. And I wondered whether you were still pursuing becoming the world's leading expert on that topic. And the second one is, I'm fascinated to know what your view is on the most salacious element of actuarial science.
Well, it might be, the most salacious element would be modified premium reserve systems. One of the interesting things about this is the book is by August Zillmer, who's a German actuary, and it takes a dim view of English actuaries. And he says some incredibly harsh things. Essentially, the English actuaries were cooking the books. And if you cook the books at a life insurance company, there can be tragic results. This is not a good thing to have done. I mean, somebody makes a bunch of money on the stock. Somebody loses a whole bunch of money on the stock, and the policyholders are. So that's as salacious as it. And it's interesting just how harsh he is, in this kind of a context. See, so that was there. Now the Horatio Alger stuff has been interesting. I have a collection of Horatio Alger novels, including one that's a first edition. The book is Helen Ford. It's one of about 2 or 3 out of 110 where the protagonist is a female. The Horatio Alger novels are Cinderella stories for boys, except that girls read them too, but they were Cinderella stories for boys, and I've got actually 2 of my best publications are Alger publications. One, I did some statistical analysis of words. Now, normally people do these word studies if they're scripture scholars or classical scholars. You don't do this to Horatio Alger. This is just crazy stuff. But I did word frequency. And the thing that turned out there is Alger probably didn't write all this stuff. Alger was a front man for a syndicate. And it's just like you read the Hardy Boys, you realize that Franklin Dixon was, or who was the gal that wrote Nancy Drew? Yeah, well, we know who was Carolyn Keene in many incarnations. So they didn't acknowledge us for Alger, so I did that. And then there's a debate whether Alger took an inordinate interest in some of the young boys in his congregation. He did. And what I did is, and this was kind of a hermeneutic analysis of a particular poem. And the poem says, yeah, I did it, in so many ways. And so that was so I have had some fun with the Alger stuff. And I've got in terms of where those publications are, they're actually in good places if you are into popular culture. Business school deans are not as excited about those publications as other folks. So I have had fun with Alger. I'm not actively doing any Alger research right now, but I have some files that could be unretired. But yes.
Do you take your Latin on the road to Kalamazoo for the International Medieval Congress?
I've got friends who are there, and right now I have to I have one of my classmates in Toronto. It was an interesting class. Most everybody in the class was 20-something, except for my study group. The youngest person in our study group was 43. I was in my 60s. The oldest in our study group was in her 80s. And that was an interesting. And so the one in her 40s is finishing her Ph.D. in English. She does the early English kinds of stuff. She lives in another time. She does Morris dancing. She's high church Anglican. She lives on another planet. Not that I don't, but anyway,
I think you would really like Kalamazoo.
Oh, I have friends in Kalamazoo, and I would love that conference. I did I went to MAMA one year, Medieval Academy of Mid-America. Tony Silvestri and I did a paper that we took there, and I had great fun at that conference. So right now, my study group and I are translating St. Jerome's Vulgate, and which is kind of cheating because we all know what it says. But now this is strange when you get to you get a class of student medievalists. I know what all the stuff says if I look at the Vulgate. The students don't. They grew up secular, and if they read some other medieval stuff, if I read a story of the saints, which are absolutely precious, they're just, I think, was it St. Brendan the Navigator? One of my very favorite saints. I mean, the stories are outrageous, but the young people reading those stories won't know a biblical allusion if it jumps up and bites them. They just won't get that stuff. And so, I'm sounding like an old guy, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Well, it is, but and I see no prospect for doing anything about it. But yeah, I have great fun with my Latin class, and I've encountered some good teachers there too. So I wanted to fill up the 75 minutes, but Steve said, probably not. Yes.
So you've done quite a bit with diversity.
Yes.
Have these folks that you've listed, have they influenced your views?
Well, my Charlene Smith influenced my views on diversity. She was a member of the law faculty here and taught torts. And she was just a lot of fun to work with. We did a paper together on what it would cost Washburn to have a domestic partner health benefits, which is nothing because we pay for our own health benefits, and that would result in some kids getting covered, who are not covered now, but it's hard for me to believe that people take a moral stand against kids having health insurance. That's not high on my list of desirable moral conclusions. So I worked with Charlene, I worked with Nancy Maxwell, I worked with some of the student groups. So that was an interesting process. One of the things that was interesting is a colleague came up to me and thanked me for that sort of thing. He had a son who was gay, and it meant a great deal to him that I worked on these issues. And he was never out about his personal situation. He told me about it, but he was never out here at work. And it just, so I got a great deal of satisfaction out of that. And I'm still active on those issues. I'm doing some things on the KU campus right now. And I like to do work in that area, and I think it's important to do that. Yes.
What would you like your students to say about you?
Well, no remarks about my ancestry or dietary preferences. I think if they cut that stuff out, I would be just as happy. I try to stay engaged in the process, try to find ways that they can be successful. So I enjoy it when students come back. I tell them I want them all to come back. I want them all to be hellishly successful. I want them to make obscene amounts of money. Obscene amounts of money. Then I want them to come back here and throw money at the university and mention my name prominently as they do so. And so that's my goal and you're not getting a straight answer, but I'm not capable of giving you a straight answer. Yeah.
We have a certificate for you in appreciation.
Okay, thank you very much.
There'll be a plaque when they can find it, they've lost it.
All right, thank you very much.
Also like to thank the Washburn Foundation for a contribution to the School of Business in Bill's name for support of activities within the School of Business. And we would also encourage you to check out the posters in Washburn A, and there's also some over in Henderson for student presentations. Thank you. John?
Thank you. Huh?
Be careful what you say.
Yes.
Because you're on.
Yeah, my mic's still on, so I can't get completely candid.